Hi guys, as Cherie mentioned, my name's Amber King. I am the Microsoft Modern Workplace Sales Specialist. I've been working on the Microsoft team for nearly 2 years now, and my sole purpose on the job is to help customers with their Microsoft devices mainly, but also to support with that messaging that we get from Microsoft in terms of Modern Workplace. And today we're going to dive in a little bit more about what is Modern Workplace, and obviously highlighting Windows 10 as the Windows 7 end of support is coming up in the next couple of months. So we're going to delve into that a little bit more and pick up some new Microsoft technologies. We've also got Ebo Barnes on the call. Ebo?
Yeah, hello everybody. So my name's Ebo Barnes. I'm the Digital Workspace Solutions Lead at Softcat. So I'm responsible for helping our customers understand primarily what that is. It's quite a large topic, and kind of go and touch into a little bit of that today so you can see a little bit more about what I do. So are you ready for the next slide?
Yeah.
So what is digital transformation? So before I actually move on to talking about how we've put together our digital workspace, digital transformation it's a funny word because it's something I've used with a lot of customers, and it actually implies that we're going to move from point A to point B and kind of pack up shop, and once we've finished, we can get back to our normal day jobs. But actually, transformation these days kind of is a different way of looking at it. It's getting ready for, Microsoft's coined this term, the evergreen estate. So it's getting ready for either a new way of working, changing the processes, how people interact with the technology or the technology itself. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's a wholesale shift of technology even, but it is just getting off this treadmill that we were used to of kind of update stuff, fire and forget, and go off and do something else, more to this ongoing way of doing things and selecting the things that will support that. So at Softcat, we tried to come up with what we consider the digital workspace. So we created a nine-box grid, and when we're trying to think about it, we're trying to think, well, what is the purpose of this? And we believe that it's about making users more productive. And if you take a step down from that, what are the things that make users productive? We believe it's creating a flexible work style. It's about creating some sort of employee choice and employee freedom, you could say. And it's about creating collaborative workspaces, whether that's with technology or actually places for people to go and work collaboratively. So on the flexible work style part, starting from the first box, AD, whether that's Azure AD or on-prem AD, making sure you kind of clean that up and you're ready for what I've just said is this transformation, this new way of doing things. Is it able to support this new environment? Do we need to consider the way we authenticate into our environment? Also, when users are accessing data and applications, both from where we know on-prem and from elsewhere, how are we going to secure the apps and the data, maybe ensuring that the device that they're using is able to support that application, the data lives in a place where we can remotely wipe it. So that's kind of the enterprise mobility management story. And then as we move down through the boxes, then it gets a bit more, not complex, but we start to think about other ways that we can improve on from an IT perspective and from a business perspective, making a better flexible work style. So we'll have things like Office 365 potentially. So how are we going to access these cloud apps and move away potentially from the traditional password credential format and think about identity and access management? How are we going to be able to create an environment where we are truly device and OS agnostic? So whether that's cloud delivered VDI, so you've got with Azure and WVD that's being brought out now, or others, or that's on-prem VDI, or whether that's your traditional, you've got Chrome devices or Microsoft devices, you've got Apple devices even, all these things that there's a mix of. We need to make sure that we are ready for that. And that the users can obviously, we don't get user adoption, and they know how to use all this cool stuff that we've created for them. And then moving to the last box, so where we talk about identity governance and administration. So automated workflows and approvals for provisioning, and we enable audit access for compliance testing. We think about how we can simplify device deployment and management, and Amber's going to go and talk about things like Autopilot, which will help do that, but also how we automate the update of the operating systems and the applications. And this is this evergreen stuff that we talk about, and there's some services which I'll mention in a second. So as we go along this story, I'm not saying that you have to do all of this, but from that, whether you call it baseline or a starting point or good, whatever that is with the AD bit, as we progress through it, making sure that we've got the right plumbing in place to be able to deliver on some of the more complex stuff that comes later on to create a flexible work style. Then moving along to the employee choice column, this is, broadly speaking, literally about allowing your users and people to work in the way that they want to. But it starts off with understanding who does what where. That personas bit, however you go about doing it, whether you use Softcat or you do it yourself, understanding what profiles you've got in the environment and who is using what devices and how are they using them. So we touch on some device analytics. We use some tools to do that. And then we need some control around that. We use our ITAM division to be able to make sure that if we're going to offer employee choice, we absolutely need to make sure at the starting point that we're able to know what license is available in the first place to be able to offer out. Then once again, moving to that middle box, then we can say you can choose your own, you can bring your own. We can create this application catalog. And then moving in further down to, I don't know if you call it blue sky thinking per se, but we can think about digital experience management. So understanding the digital behavior in order to improve the experience and productivity of a user. And then obviously then we want to think that employee choice comes from being able to self-serve, and you can automate some of those processes. And then that last column, collaborative workspaces. You're going to have a version of some voice, possibly some video conferencing, some messaging, and the endpoints to do that, and that's fine. You've got all these different bits. But as we move through the story, and much like today on today's webinar, we've got a lot of people coming together to be able to share information, that we need to think about platform integrations and a unified communications platform. And things like Microsoft Teams, for example, on a bit of a Microsoft WebEx here, so I don't mind mentioning it. That can do a lot of these things. So when we're able to bring the voice, video messaging, and endpoint into one place, that improves that story that we're trying to tell in the collaborative workspace. And then that last box, and some of this, once again, it might be a bit blue sky. I know we've all heard of IoT, and that is becoming more prolific in a lot of the customers and environments that we talk about. Immersive experiences, you kind of feel that's talking about put on some 3D goggles, but we are finding that what was once really expensive, it's been around for ages, 10 years ago, to immerse yourself in multi-screen so you feel like you're in a room in a meeting with somebody, actually is becoming more commoditized. So through that 9-box grid, for us, that digital workspace and that transformation, it's a form of that. It will take shape as part of that, maybe not all of it, but they definitely all at one point touch each other. Next slide, please. Okay, so your journey to Windows 10. So I'll talk through a couple of the points on this. I want to talk about the second point initially. So digital workplace is an important conversation for a lot of organizations, but I guess it's the why now. And we believe, and I talked about productivity a second ago, we believe that in order to be productive, the user experience needs to be good. So if you go back maybe 10 years or so, a decade ago, an organization had perhaps 4 or 5 profiles that you create and you deliver your EUC to match this, and it was a lot simpler, far less complex. Now you roll forward to 10 years and to today. There's been a technology explosion which has led to the proliferation of those user profiles, and sometimes even a single user can have 4 or 5 profiles alone. Not all of them, but that on its own means that whatever we do is going to have an impact to the users. And that is, of course, going to make it an important conversation. In digital workspace, what we do is the first people who experience the changes that we make are the users. So anything we do, whether that's a positive impact or a negative impact, it's really important that we understand the changes that we're making. And then the next point, so why is transitioning to Windows 10 important? So I guess thing one, Windows 10 is going to be iterative. So the look and the feel, as we all know, isn't going to change that much. That's really important because it means that, and I'll mention that word productive again, users are going to hopefully be far more productive because we're not imposing this massive change every few years and saying, well, now go get used to this, and there's this big process change. And actually, and something I talk to customers about is creating flexible working and work-life balance and mental health in the workplace. I think that look and change for this, it helps improve mental health in the workplace because users are used to using things a certain way and we're not actually making changes on them too often. The second thing, Windows 10 is designed natively to work with 0D. So we know things like Office 365, and we want to have that working well in this environment. We're going to need a 0D account for Windows 10 to work well with Office 365. Now, you could have done that with Windows 7, but there was a bit more work to do behind the scenes. So if we've got something here that for a change works natively with it, and it kind of means that you can be a bit more at peace knowing that someone else has done the work and this is just going to work almost out of the box. And then thirdly, Windows 10, if you couple it with things like Office 365, a 0AD, the security tool sets that we've got with EM&S. Now, I'm on a Microsoft WebEx here, so obviously this is all very Microsofty. But if you just take those, 4 or 5 different products and tools that I've mentioned, and then if you can consolidate that down, you're saying that actually if you use all of that with one vendor, you're then able to provide hopefully a consistent experience for both for IT and users across multiple devices because we're using kind of the same stuff, just with their different tools able to do it. And there are other things that can do it, but yeah, anything where we're able to consolidate, absolutely. So that's what, once again, Windows 10 really fits well into that message. And then the last point, what are the new technologies that we're using? I'm going to contradict myself slightly here. So the new technologies fall outside of this one vendor idea that I've just mentioned. So one of them, actually, to start off with, and I'm just going to talk about in a second, is Autopilot. So fair, that sits within the Microsoft stack. And actually, at Ignite last week, Microsoft were mentioning things like SCCM and Intune being brought together. But on top of that, Softcat have been looking at other tools and services outside of the Microsoft stack that will support that transition. And that comes back to what I mentioned before with the 9-box grid about things like services that allow, or tools that allow you to automate the application updates. And by all means, we haven't got time on this webinar today for me to do it, but if anybody wants to contact me through your account manager, I'm happy to go through either that or the 9-box grid in more detail where we can talk about some of those services. So back over to you, Amber.
Thanks, Ebo. Thank you. Okay, so Ebo's done a great summary of kind of the journey so far and what it looks like and digital transformation. So the next sort of slides we're going to talk about transitioning to Windows 10 and some of those new technologies. So there are a few things to consider when transitioning to Windows 10. So the first thing that we kind of picked out is the devices. It's making sure that you have devices that are up to date to make that transition smooth and easy. So for this, we obviously know that Surface is probably the best device to push out Windows 10 with. It's a Microsoft product, so therefore it works best with the Microsoft technologies. But obviously there are other vendors that work hand in hand. But make sure that you're thinking about those devices. It's not just thinking about the operating system. It's thinking about the bigger picture. So updating those devices and making sure that your users are on some up-to-date devices. You can rethink the purchasing of devices. We have a device as a service team here, and so you can package that up into either a monthly payment, and you can bolt on services and add on different features to make that whole package. So you're not just buying the device, you can buy the support that comes along with it, and just kind of bulk up that solution to make it simpler. So that's definitely something to consider, and we have a great device as a service team here. We also have a great lifecycle services team, because you're thinking about, if you're going to get rid of your old devices, what are you going to do with them? What are you going to do with the data on them? And we have a really great team that can have those deeper conversations in terms of, can you get any money back from those old devices with our buyback scheme? And like I said, what are you going to do with the data that was on those devices that needs to be wiped? And we have a team that can make sure that gets done in the correct way. So just having a little bit of a think about what the best route is for you. The second point, and to what Ebo mentioned about deployment, Autopilot is obviously a big thing for Microsoft at the moment. I'm sure many of you are aware of it. If you're not, then it's a cloud-based technology that helps push out the images. Like Ebo said, SCCM isn't going away, and Ignite mentioned that SCCM and Intune are coming together. So there's some really exciting features with Autopilot and SCCM, which means that deployment is just that much easier, and can just make for a simple process when you're transitioning to a Windows 10. So then the final point to consider is security. Obviously, this is a big thing for a lot of organizations at the moment, and it's important that your devices are secure, that your operating systems are secure, that it's just something that everyone's talking about, especially with the topic of GDPR still in the back of people's minds. Even though that date has passed, it's still something that people talk about a lot. So Windows 10 Pro comes with built-in features. One of them is Windows Hello, which is a facial recognition, or a biometric recognition system. It means that you can remove the use for passwords, and it's much more secure. It's 3 times faster, and just little features like that are included in Windows 10 Pro is just why Windows 10 is really amped up on the security side of things, so it's important to consider that as well. And obviously, when Windows 7 ends, there's those guys that are going to be out there with looking to hack those old, outdated systems, and it's going to be the prime time to go for it. So it's really important that we're making sure that everything's up to date and that security features are up to scratch. So talking about new technologies, Microsoft 365 is something that Microsoft are really trying to push. This bundle comprises of 3 different features. So you've got Office 365, Windows 10, and Enterprise Mobility Suite. So one point that we're just going to touch on is the Office 365 element and the Teams element that is included in this Microsoft 365 bundle. As Ebo spoke about before, there's a big push for productivity and collaborative working, and Teams is definitely the platform that is perfect for that. You can do collaborative meetings, you can do calls on your phone, you can do calls off of your devices, and you can kind of have a meeting anywhere really, and that's the message that Microsoft are really trying to push. And they feel that Teams is going to be the way forward. They're bringing all of the applications into one place, so you can edit Word documents collaboratively, and you can pull spreadsheets, and you can instant message, and it's all there in one place. So you don't have to try and find a meeting space or get to another office to meet someone. You can do it all in one place. And so Teams is a really hot topic with Microsoft at the moment, so it's definitely something that you want to keep an eye on. So yeah, that's just something to bear in mind. And then we'll bring it back to the Windows Autopilot. discussion that we were having. We'll briefly touch on what it is. We won't go into too much detail because I'll definitely scope for a whole half an hour discussion on what Autopilot actually is. But it's a cloud-based technology that means that you can pre-configure devices ready for use. We've got this diagram here that's quite a great explanation of how it works, really. It removes that time-consuming and costly process of imaging devices, and it means that a device can be shipped straight from Microsoft to, or whatever the vendor may be, to the employee, and it doesn't have to go via an IT team, and it just removes that time-consuming process. The bonus with a Microsoft device, such as a Surface, is that we don't have to go via a third party to collect the serial numbers which are needed to be uploaded for a customer. With third parties, they're kind of getting on board with the idea of Autopilot, but at the moment we still need a third party. So if you are purchasing a device from your account manager and it's a Surface device, you can get it next day and it can be deployed with Autopilot. However, there is a couple of days waiting time for other vendors, but that process is catching up. But it's just something to bear in mind, and it's something that Microsoft are talking about a lot. So if you have any questions about Autopilot, definitely get in contact with your account manager because we can have some deeper discussions. There's some prerequisites that we need, such as Intune and Azure AD, to make sure that you can push out Autopilot. But it's a great new feature and a great solution to reducing those costs and making that transition smoother. So just a couple of benefits of Autopilot. It's a zero-touch solution, so it means that you don't have to get an IT individual to work on that device and image the device. So it removes that. Like I said, it reduces costs. You can redistribute the costs elsewhere that you would use for imaging because there are limited costs associated to it. And the ease of configuring, really, it's just all in one place. It's really easy to manage. It's really easy to deploy. We have some great customers that we've used Autopilot with, and they just love the process, and they just think it's a lot slicker and very easy. So it's definitely something that people are getting on board with and finding really beneficial and just really easy to use. So I'm just going to touch on some of the Microsoft devices. So obviously they're the Surface devices. We have four main devices that we like to talk about in the portfolio. So going from left to right, we have the Surface Pro. This has been around for the last 7 years now. Obviously, they've changed it in many ways, but they've kind of kept the appearance the same. It's great for those remote on-the-go workers. It's a 2-in-1, so it can change to a tablet, and it's just one of those legacy Microsoft devices that people still love and use, and they're updating it every time they are releasing new products. So just keep an eye on the Surface Pro because it's always something that Microsoft are updating and customers still love them. Then you've got the laptop, and Microsoft announced a few weeks ago that there's a release of the Laptop 3, and they've included some new features like enhanced microphones and speakers and the camera to really hone in on that Teams messaging that they're delivering, that you can have a meeting anywhere, and it really makes that collaborative message a lot more poignant, and it's easy to do, and all those features are there in one device. Then you've got the Surface Book 2. This device has been around for a few years now, and it's perfect for those users that need a little bit more processing power. So those devices are really great for graphic designers, architects, that sort of thing. So they're very powerful devices, and they're kind of our powerhouse device. And then you've got the Surface Go at the end, which is the smallest device, which we have conversations with a lot of education customers and frontline workers, because these are great for on the go. They're really small and easy just to hold in one hand. And then obviously for education, they're great for children and teachers to use the device because they're small and they still have the capability of a two-in-one because they have the detachable keyboard. So yeah, just a few key points on the Surface devices. And like I said, they work best with the Microsoft technologies, Autopilot especially. So just something to bear in mind. So now we're going to move on to a customer's Windows 10 journey. Ebo, can you kind of give us a bit of a background on an example of this that you've been having with one of your customers?
Yeah, sure. So if you take away the ticking clock of Jan 2020 for a minute, because I know that adds undue pressure to some people, I think our approach is the same regardless if you take away that pressure for digital workspace and Windows 10 projects in general. And that's, we try to approach it either tactically, strategically, or a combination of both. And it's understanding where the customer wants to get to, with Windows 10 that will help create that plan. So for example, I've had some customers where they just want to get to Windows 10, have just literally wanted to get up to that operating system so they're supported. They know mostly how they want to manage it once they get there. And they just need some help to get there. And I'd say that's a tactical project. So where we help is once we've understood the bits that they want to make those changes to, we try and help them with some of the vendor selection for any of the technology that might support it, any of the plumbing that might need to be put in place to do it, and just say, have you thought about this, and make those recommendations. We sometimes help them crash test the suitability of the technology against its business or technical operational targets. We use a methodology called Moscow, so must have, should have, could have, would have. So we just give them the tools. And almost when I say step back, it is tactical, so it's just helping them get to that place as quickly as possible. And then later on, we can get involved strategically, which I can talk about in a second. On the other hand, we've had customers who've come to us and said, we want to get there, but we don't know what tools we want to use, what the supporting technologies may be. We don't know why we're trying to get there even, other than it's been forced on us. And in those situations, we take a step back completely from the technology, and that becomes more of a business conversation and more an IT objectives conversation. We create workshops to have conversations and with various people in the IT team about what is it you're trying to change. And when I say, we know it's a Windows 10 project, but what is the actual output of this that you'd like to be? What is it that you'd like to make your user more productive with, etc. And then once we've got that, then we can import that into our discovery services. So we have a whole list of activities that it's almost one for every, and probably even more, for every box I had in that 9-box grid, for every activity there. So once we've captured the information of what they're trying to do, then we say, well, actually, you might need to do this, 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 and this. And some of those activities probably fall outside of the original scope of getting to Windows 10, but we know, for example, that if we make this change here, but we don't address this other thing over there, the project will fail. So we take the ownership. We work with the customer, but we own the outcome, knowing where they want to get to. And then we can make, once again, the technology recommendations, produce high-level designs. We own the implementation along with the customer, and we get through to that, the bit where we want to, which is deploy and then operational. And particularly with Windows 10, we've just started with a couple of customers to talk about that ongoing services bit, which I mentioned before. We've now found organizations that will take your application set off of your hands, quite literally, update them against the latest version of Windows 10, and then give them back to you, and that's job done. So that's allowing to our customers to be a bit more hands-off. So yeah, for these types of projects, it's not any one way, and it's often a combination of both. But it's been interesting because no matter how quickly people want to get there, I think there's always a little bit more thought than they think. But yeah, that's what we're here to do.
Thanks, Ebo. So we don't actually have any time for questions now, but please do send them over. Either ask your account manager or send them over in the chat option. But yeah, we'll make sure we pick those questions up and answer them. So anything that you missed or that you want us to send over, please just let us know. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for listening, guys.